Hey everybody, it's time for chapter 13 of The Trumpet of the Swan by E.B. White. Chapter 13 is called End of Summer. So we know that Louis has been at camp and now it's the end of summer. So that's going to be coming to an end. We got to see what happens next. Here's some vocabulary words from chapter 13. Valves, ambition, plumage, acquired, and possessions. So those are some of the terms we're going to hear in chapter 13 that you can add to your notebook. Put some definitions with those, put some pictures with those. All right, let's jump into chapter 13. End of summer. A trumpet has three little valves. There's your first word, valves. Therefore, the fingers of the player, and they look like this. There they are. See the three valves? By pushing them down in the right order, the player can produce all the notes of the musical scale. Louis had often examined these three little valves on his horn, but he had never been able to use them. He had three front toes on each foot, but being a water bird, he had webbed feet. We've learned about that with birds, haven't we? That is one of the water birds' adaptations, that their feet help them survive because they need to be able to swim. So he has webbed feet. The webbing prevented him from using his three toes independently. Luckily, the valves on a trumpet are not needed for bugle calls because bugle calls are just combinations of do, mi, and so, and a trumpet can play do, mi, and so without pressing down on any of the valves. Okay, I'm gonna have to explain that for a minute. So a bugle, I guess, is kind of like a trumpet without any valves. And you can play different notes just by the way you do your mouth, and you don't have to be able to push the buttons. But a trumpet actually has valves, and if you can push those down, you can play all the notes. Now, when E.B. White is talking about do, mi, and so, this is coming from, it's called solfege in music theory, and Aaron and Sarah take choir and band, and they learn how to read music, and they learn about solfege. And you also probably, if you've ever seen it, have heard of it in The Sound of Music, where they say, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And then she teaches them do, a do, a female do. Well, I had heard that as a kid, but I didn't know until Aaron and Sarah got into middle and high school studying music theory that the solfege, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, is a real thing that people who study music learn. And so when they're learning to read music, they actually go all around with the do, re, mi. It's very cool to listen to. So that's why I brought that up. So in order to play the bugle calls at camp, Louis didn't need to use the valves because he only needed the three notes, do, mi, and so. But let's keep going. If I could just work those three valves with my three toes, he said to himself, I could play all sorts of music, not just bugle calls. I could play jazz, I could play country western, I could play rock and roll. I could play the great music of Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Sibelius, Gershwin, Irving Berlin, Brahms, everybody. I could really be a trumpet player, not just a camp bugler. I might even get a job with an orchestra. The thought filled him with ambition. Louis loved music, and besides, he was already casting about for ways of making money after camp was over. Although he enjoyed life at Camp Kookooskoos, Louis often thought of his home on Upper Red Rock Lake in Montana. He thought about his parents, his brothers and sisters, and of course, about Serena. He was terribly in love with Serena, and he often wondered what was happening to her. At night, he would look up at the stars and think about her. In the late evening, when the big bullfrogs were calling from across the still lake, he would think of Serena, and sometimes he felt sad and lonely and homesick. His music, however, was a comfort to him. He loved the sound of his trumpet. Summer passed all too quickly. On the last day of camp, Mr. Brickle called his counselors together and paid them what he owed them. Louis received $100. the first money he had ever earned. He had no wallet and no pockets, so Mr. Brickle placed the money in a waterproof bag that had a drawstring. He hung this money around Louie's neck, along with the trumpet, the slate, the chalk pencil, and the life-saving medal. Louie went to Sam Beaver's tent and found Sam packing his things. Louie took off his slate and pencil. "I need another job," he wrote. "Where should I go?" Sam sat down on his bed and thought for a while. Then he said, "Go to Boston. Maybe you can get a job with the Swan boat." Louie had never been to Boston, and he had no idea what the Swan boat was, but he nodded his head. Then on his slate he wrote, "Do me a favor." Before we get into the favor, because that's a very specific thing that's about to happen, I want to encourage you, if you want, you can pause this video and look up Montana, which is where Louie and Sam live, Ontario, which is where the camp was, and Boston, and see how far apart these places are. The other thing I want to encourage you is that Sam has told Louie that he might be able to get a job with the Swan boat. I've actually taken my family to Boston once. We took a road trip, and we were way up north. Anyway, we took the train into Boston, and one thing we did was ride a Swan boat. And one story that you can read or maybe find a video of if you don't have the book is Make Way for Ducklings. In fact, I'll see if it's on Epic and I'll assign it to you. That story takes place in Boston, and you'll get to see a picture of a swan boat. All right, let me get back to the story. So Sam says that Louie should try going to Boston. That's a long way away. But before he leaves, Louie wants Sam to do him a favor. "Sure," said Sam. "Take a razor blade and slit the web on my right foot so I can wiggle my toes." Louie wrote that on his slate. He held out his foot. "Why do you want to wiggle your toes?" asked Sam. "You'll see," wrote Louie. I need my toes in my business." Sam hesitated. Then he borrowed a razor blade from one of the older counselors. He made a long, neat cut between Louie's inner toe and middle toe, and then he made another cut between Louie's middle toe and outer toe. Ow, don't go doing this to yourself, guys. It's part of the story, though. Let's see what's going on. Oh, wait, I missed a line. "Does it hurt?" Sam asked Louie. "That's exactly what I was wondering." Louie shook his head. He lifted his trumpet, placed his toes on the valves. Ooh, so now that Sam has slit the webbing, because see, the webbing is like, you wouldn't be able to do it. Now that he put slits, which apparently didn't hurt Louie at all, now he lifted his trumpet, placed his toes on the valves, and played do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. He can play all the notes now. Sam grinned. "The Swan boat will hire you, all right," he said. "You're a real trumpeter now. But with your web cut, swimming will be harder for you. You will have a tendency to swim in circles because your left foot will push better than your right foot. So his left foot is still webbed and his right foot isn't. So his left foot is going to push better." "I can manage," Louie wrote on his slate. "Thank you very much for the surgery." Next day, the campers left. The canoes had been hoisted onto racks in the boathouse. The float had been hauled onto the beach. The windows of the lodge had been boarded up against bears and squirrels. Mattresses had been packed into zipper bags, and everything was snug and ready for the long, silent winter. Of all the campers, only Louie stayed behind. His flight feathers were growing fast, but he couldn't fly yet. He made up his mind he would remain at camp all alone until he was able to take to the air again, and then he would fly straight to Boston. The lake was lonely without the boys, but Louie didn't mind being alone. For the next 3 weeks, he took life easy. He grew his flight feathers, he dreamed of Serena by day and night, and he practiced his trumpet. He had listened to music all summer. Several of the boys had radios and record players, and now he practiced the songs on his trumpet. Every day he got better and better. One day, he composed a love song for Serena and wrote the words and music on his slate. Now, the book has the notes here, but I don't have a piano right now. Sarah has a keyboard in her room. But I'm not going to take the phone with me now. Maybe another day I'll do that, but I will read the words to you. Oh, ever in the greening spring, by bank and bough retiring, for love shall I be sorrowing, and swans of my desiring. How lovely. The notes are there too, so I'll try to play the tune another day, because that song comes up again. He was really thinking of Serena, but he left her name out of it and kept it impersonal. His plumage was beautiful now, and he felt great. On the 21st of September, he tried his wings. To his great relief, they lifted him. Louis rose into the air. The trumpet banged against the slate, and the slate knocked against the money bag, and the life-saving metal clinked against the chalk pencil, but Louis was airborne again. He climbed and climbed and headed for Boston. It was wonderful to be in the sky again. Flying is a lot harder than it was before I acquired all these possessions, thought Louis. The best way to travel really is to travel light. On the other hand, I have to have these things. I've got to have the trumpet if I'm to win Serena for my wife. I've got to carry this money bag to hold the money to pay for my father's debt. I've got to have the slate and pencil so I can communicate with people. And I ought to wear the medal because I really did save a life. And if I didn't wear it, people might think I was ungrateful. On and on he flew toward Boston, which is the capital of Massachusetts and is famous for its baked beans, its codfish, its tea parties, its cabots, its lulls, its Saltonstalls, and its swan boats. Well, chapter 14 is called Boston, so we'll have to see what happens to Louis when he gets there. Thanks for reading with me today. I'll see you next time.